volunteers to put on an event like this. As you can imagine, you can see the decorations and you can tell the planning that's gone into this. So I would like to first of all, and she's probably not up here, but I do want to acknowledge Linda Taylor for the excellent meal. Pretty hard to beat home-cooked turkey and mashed potatoes. I think that pretty well does it for everybody. I also like to acknowledge we do have a 125th anniversary committee, and we've been meeting quite often, and this night is part of that outcome of those meetings. I want to thank Doug Smith for arranging for the music tonight and the efforts he's made. I want to thank our young student servers. They've done an excellent job, and they've been running up and down stairs all night, and that's not easy. I want to thank our bartenders that are here courtesy of the Rotary Club. They are volunteers, and they're here tonight to help the town out. Also the volunteers that have come forward to help us set up the hall tonight and will likely be here tomorrow morning to help us take everything down. It's a lot of work, and we certainly do appreciate it. We couldn't do it without you. Members of the town staff who have done a lot of work on this, including, most importantly, carrying the liquor into the bar. We want to thank you. And finally, in advance, I do want to thank the members of the orchestra that will be playing tonight and supplying us with some great music. So we actually have, in your program, you'll see ribbon cutting. We actually do want to do a ribbon cutting tonight. This has been a while for us waiting to do this. But we've done a lot of work, as you can probably see. Those that are familiar with this building will know by looking around. We've done a lot of work in the last couple of years with this building. And we felt that it was appropriate to have a reopening or a rededication, however you want to phrase it. And I thought just before we do that, I'd give you a little bit of history of this building. It all started off with a fire. And fire, as you know, could be a terrible thing. It causes loss of property and occasionally loss of life. In fact, back in the early days when most of the buildings in Gore Bay and area were made of wood, and they had wood stoves and oil lamps and gas lamps, fires were the norm. But just like after a forest fire, from the smoldering ashes, there will be new life. Such was the case in Gore Bay on a summer day in August of 1908, when a fire started in a store, which was located pretty much where we're sitting, and spread rapidly across the street, taking out 15 businesses and 8 houses. So in other words, you could stand here and see the arena quite easily. You can imagine the devastation for a small town. However, from these ashes, where the Great Fire actually started, 19 years later, Gore Bay's first community hall and the building we're sitting in tonight was constructed in 1927. Long before the phrase public-private partnership was coined, the construction of this community hall was just that. I actually went through the council minute books of 1927 and 1928, and I found that by resolution of council in 1927, a committee made up of 3 citizens of the community were authorized to raise funds and construct this building. They were Alexander Purvis, William Hagan, and William Smith. Names that I'm sure some of you might be familiar with. It's interesting to note, though, that from the minutes of those meetings, the decision of council, for whatever the reason, was not unanimous. In fact, in a recorded vote of 4-3, the motion was passed to build a hall. So there were some people that felt perhaps it was not the right thing to do. However, the hall was built. The property was acquired from John Russell McGregor, Frederick Smith, and George McRae. Money for construction was obtained by a grant from council, but also by loans from various citizens around the community. In January of 1928, a new mayor and council were elected, consisting of Mayor Frederick Smith, who in fact is Doug's grandfather, and councillors Johnson, Burns, Riching, Purvis, Jaffrey, and Bowser. Again, names I'm sure, surnames I'm sure that some will be familiar to some people. At their meeting in August the 24th of 1928, the new council agreed to accept a conveyance from the committee of the newly constructed hall, and the rest is history, 88 years ago. I think it's fair to say the heart of any small community like ours is our community hall. It stands in the center of our town. It commands prominence on the main street. It is a social gathering place for the citizens of the town and its visitors. Over the years, it has seen many types of events, private and public, from live theater, movies, including in the early days, in fact, silent movies, concerts, auction sales, fundraisers, public meetings, wedding receptions. Even people came here to vote. And of course, the Sailor's Ball, which would be familiar to some of the older generation, and the New Year's Dance, which is familiar to all of us. Over the past 88 years, it has seen it all. With the passage of time, a number of improvements were needed, the most recent one being in the last 2 or 3 years, where we saw an extensive renovation of both levels, the addition of handicapped accessibility, landscaping on the grounds, and repairs to the outer walls. This hall was built of Manitoulin limestone and was built to last, consisting of an outer wall and an inner wall entirely made of stone and mortar. The most recent contractor told me that after all these years, those walls had not shifted or settled one little bit, 88 years later. You can imagine the workmanship. We are proud of our hall, and as part of the celebration of our 125th anniversary, we will tonight rededicate this building to the future use of the citizens of Gore Bay by a special ribbon cutting ceremony. So I would ask Doug to come forward, Deputy Mayor Jack Clark, and CEO Annette Clark to assist. So we'll hold it up a little bit so everybody can see. Everybody can see? I want to cover my straight face so you can't take a picture. So you all ready, Doug? 1, 2, 3. I wish everything in municipal government was that easy. We do have some special presentations to make tonight. At our last, or I should say at our first event to commemorate this year, we had an open house in this building in April, and we presented citizen awards to the oldest resident of Gore Bay, the youngest resident of Gore Bay, and the oldest living councillor in Gore Bay. Tonight we present a different type of citizen award. As President John F. Kennedy, in his inaugural speech after his election, said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Clearly this was intended to inspire citizens to see the importance of civic action and public service. His historic words challenged his fellow citizens to contribute in some way to the public good. Small towns like Gore Bay, despite population growth in large cities, in my view, are still the backbone of this country. We face many challenges in the maintenance and development of our communities to make it the best place to live and work it can possibly be. To deal with these challenges, it takes the effort of everyone in the community to contribute in some fashion, to ensure our continued success and that generations to follow have a future here. In the past, Council has honored its volunteers and its seniors in the presentation of annual awards, and we intend to continue that process, thanking them for all they do. However, there are certain citizens in our community that go or have gone above and beyond in their efforts to benefit others in their own way, whether it be through the course of their vocation, their business, or public office. Through a lifetime of contribution, these citizens have made a significant positive impact on the town and have made a lasting difference. Council, in recognition of this, is developing a Lifetime Achievement Award that will honor those outstanding citizens and thank them for all they have done or continue to do. We're not doing this because we have to, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do. In addition to the awards being presented tonight, these recipients, along with future recipients, will be memorialized in a display in the public lobby of our Gore Municipal Building. It will be there for years to come so that the current and future residents and visitors to our town will know and be able to appreciate the contribution these people have made. To inaugurate this policy, and on the recommendation of the 125th Anniversary Committee, the Council of the Town of Gore Bay, on behalf of its citizens, has chosen to honor 3 gentlemen tonight, 2 living and 1 deceased, that by a lifetime of effort have made a lasting and profound difference in their community. Tonight, we have chosen to honor and thank John McQuarrie, Doug Smith, and John Lane. These 3 gentlemen have many things in common. They were all born and raised in or near Gore Bay. They can all trace their families back to the early inhabitants of this area. They were all good friends and throughout their lifetimes worked together on many projects to benefit their community. They have all received various honors and awards over the years from other levels of government. Tonight we present them with a special award from their hometown as a thank you to them on behalf of their friends, their neighbors, and their fellow residents for all they have done for their community. So by drawing straws, so there's no indication of favoritism, I would like to speak first of John, and as I call him, Jack McQuarrie, who I'm sure will be familiar to many of you. John, or Jack, I'll call him Jack, it's easier for me to remember, was born and raised and still resides in Gore Bay. Jack had many adventures during his time, but fortunately he was able to persuade a fair young lady from the Silverwater area to marry him in 1953, and following that he had someone to provide strength and guidance he needed to carry out his future endeavors. Jack, after spending some time at the local bake shop and at McQuarrie Motors, ventured into the world of journalism when he acquired the Manitoulin Recorder newspaper. The Recorder was one of the oldest newspapers in Ontario, with his roots going back to 1877. His first chore was to bring the operation of this paper into the 20th century operational mode. Following that, and in addition to publishing the Recorder on a weekly basis, Jack moved on to create a commercial print shop, a weekly newspaper in Espanola. Throughout, the development of these businesses was always a family affair, with everybody taking on their own responsibility and making their own contribution. It was through his work at the Recorder that Jack gained his respect for history, and the fact that with every edition of his newspaper, it was history in the making, as his paper reported on current events of the day. As the years passed, that became a permanent historical record. Dating back to ancient times, every civilization has had individuals that have reported and chronicled the life and times of their society that made that era and its people unique. These individuals became the historian of their day. Their writings provided information and insight to help future generations know and understand their origins and their roots. Jack, through his many years as the owner and operator of the Recorder, became the historian of Gore Bay and the Manitoulin area, which I would like to say includes Coburn Island. For Gore Bay's centennial year in 1990, he researched and wrote the early years of Gore Bay, with its amazing pictures and detailed text. This year, to commemorate our 125th anniversary, Jack has updated and re-released this publication. And and it is excellent. It is required reading for anyone that wants to know about our history, who we are, and what we have accomplished as a town. In addition to this publication, Jack has written more than 12 other historical books, and I am sure, knowing Jack, that he still is thinking about more. Besides his contribution to providing us with a record of our history, Jack has participated in every aspect of his community, from being a municipal councillor, a service club member, a dedicated member of his church, in the development of the local ambulance service, a justice of the peace, in the construction of the medical center, and a member of too many boards and committees to list. Besides all of this, I do have to say, on my rare visit to Coburn Island, he also makes a damn good drink. It is with great pleasure that I present, on behalf of Council and the citizens of Gore Bay, a Lifetime Achievement Award to John, aka Jack McCrory. Before I present the award to Jack, I just want to read what it says. Town of Gore Bay Lifetime Achievement Award, awarded to Willis John McCrory. In recognition of a lifetime of significant contribution to his community of the town of Gore Bay, and by such contribution and efforts, he has improved the quality of life for the citizens of Gore Bay and beyond. Awarded this 30th day of May, 2015, signed by me as head of council. Congratulations, Jack.
I know why.
Could you turn this way just at the same photo? Thank you for,
Well, they want another picture, Jack.
please. Hold it up. Thank you.
There's your hard one, Jack. There's your hard one. But the first time I've ever heard Jack not have any comment about it. So we move on to our second recipient, Doug Smith. Doug, like Jack, was born and raised in Gore Bay and has lived here all his life. It would be difficult to go anywhere in this part of the world and find someone who has not heard of Doug and the company he built, Manitoulin Transport. Manitoulin Transport was from its beginning and continues to be a family operation. Doug, from a small beginning with one truck, over the last 60 years has developed Manitoulin Transport to the point where it is today one of the 10 largest trucking companies in Canada. The Manitoulin group of companies have expanded into logistics, warehousing, global freight forwarding, customs brokerage, and fuel distribution. In fact, one of their companies has even opened branches in Asia, Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Beijing. All the time Doug was building his business and providing transportation services to all parts of Canada, he was determined, despite I am sure many good reasons otherwise, to keep the head office of all these companies in his hometown of Gore Bay, where it currently employs over 250 people. The impact on Gore Bay in particular, and Manitoulin Island in general, from the presence of his company is immeasurable. Not only has it allowed many local people to be able to live and work in their community, but it's also attracted many other people from other parts of Canada to Gore Bay and area. These people have bought and built houses, they have raised their families, and they themselves have become an integral part of our community. In addition to the economic spin-off that Doug and his company have brought to Gore Bay and Manitoulin Island, many charitable organizations and community projects have benefited from the financial support from Manitoulin Transport and the Smith family. It is very difficult for a small town like Gore Bay to complete large projects because it would simply be not possible based on our small tax base to raise the required funds that are needed for them. Fortunately for us, in an era when public-private partnerships are prevalent and in fact encouraged by higher levels of government, Doug has stepped forward to partner with Council on various projects, including, in fact, the renovation of this building, improvements to our harbour and our marina, upgrades to our medical centre, beautification of our main street, and the preservation of our historic buildings. As a community, we benefit greatly from Doug's common sense approach and his desire to help his hometown any way he can, now and in the future. Doug has been a recipient of many awards over the years from various organizations, including the prestigious Order of Canada from the Governor General of our country. It is with great pleasure tonight that I present on behalf of Council and the citizens of Gore Bay a Lifetime Achievement Award to Doug Smith.
Could you stand with the mayor again one more time, just because granddaughter would like one picture? Thank you. And I would like one too. Thank you very much. Perfect.
I guess, are you done?
Thank you.
It seems like Doug and Jack are getting off easy and I'm doing all the work here. So I'm going to call upon Deputy Mayor Jack Clark to present the next award.
Firstly, let me say what an honor it is to stand here and present awards to these types of people. When I speak of the contributions that John Lane has made to this town, I believe I am truly speaking to the choir. Most of you people will have a much better appreciation and understanding of just what John meant to this town and what he did to make it such a vibrant place that it still is today. A brief history. John was born on the family farm in Barry Island in 1916, and he did what most young men did at that time. He graduated from school early and went to work on the family farm. He had stints working in the bush, working in the sawmill, being a carpenter's apprentice, those types of jobs, until he was able to buy his own farm. His farming lasted for 20 years. 15 years in, he started selling insurance on the side, because we all know farming was such an easy job at that time. Eventually, the insurance business became full-time and caused John to sell the farm and move Louise and family to Gore Bay. His political career began at the age of 23 when he first served as a councillor on Barry Island. He did that continuously for 20 years. He was elected to Gore Bay Council in 1963 and subsequently was elected as mayor in 1967, a position he held until 1971 when he was elected to the Ontario legislature for the riding of Algoma, Manitoulin. He served tirelessly and faithfully in that position on numerous boards and committees until his retirement in 1986. 45 years of political service to the municipality and to the province. For me to get close to that, I need to serve 9 more terms on council. I trust you people will not be foolish enough to let that happen. John was truly a visionary. He was never afraid to take on the big projects or to make the tough decisions. The sale of the Manitoulin or the Gore Bay telephone system was very controversial at the time, but the funds allowed us to develop a huge chunk of infrastructure that still serves the town well. The development of the waterfront, the extension and upgrade of the water and the sewer system, and the purchase and repairs of many of the buildings that you still see around the town today. John was instrumental in bringing the nursing home to Gore Bay, the construction of the medical center, the construction of the seniors' accommodations, the golf course, and the curling club. He worked tirelessly to ensure the development of the Ministry of Northern Affairs and Development, and was able to secure countless projects for the riding, particularly during the 1980s when the recession was hard hit. Roads was always a major issue with John, and I believe it's hereditary or genetic, whichever it is, because his son and I have had numerous, shall we say, discussions on how much money we should be spending during budget times in town. And I'm sure that if I stay on council long enough, I'm going to win one of those discussions. The amalgamation of the island schools, high school system, the purchase and the putting into service of the Chichimon. The list goes on, and time precludes me from listing them all. True measure of the character of the man, however, I believe, is the one thing that he felt was probably the most rewarding project that he ever worked on, was working with Renee Noble to establish the Flower of Hope School in Gore Bay. For all these accomplishments, though, I believe the true measure of the man is not in the things that we all know about, but the things that we don't know about. The things that he did every day, made the right decisions for himself, for the community, and for the betterment of all of Northern Ontario. For the countless nights he spent at Queen's Park, for the endless hours, and his perseverance in pushing through projects when it would have been extremely easy just to not bother. For all these things, it really comes down to the work ethic and sense of value that he learned as a young man way out there in Barrie Island. John said, "I believe that Gore Bay is one of the best towns in Ontario, and I am proud to have been able to help shape it for a better tomorrow." John, we're extremely proud to have known and appreciate you, and we thank you very much for everything you've done for the town. Ron, if I could ask you to come up and accept the award on behalf of your father.
I'd like to thank Jack very much for those kind words. If my dad was living today, he would be in his 99th year, one short of a century. During his lifetime, he was dedicated to two things: his family and his community. As we celebrate 125 years plus of the history of Gore Bay, my dad's life was really a reflection of all those years. He was born, as Jack has mentioned, in 1916 to parents that immigrated here in the late 1890s. The world was in the middle of a great war. Seriously sick, he survived the great flu epidemic of 1918. In the roaring 20s, the era we celebrate tonight, he was a young boy and a teenager. As a young man in the 1930s, in the depths of the Great Depression, he did any job he could to make a living. In the 40s and the 50s, he owned his own farm and supplied his family, the community, and the war effort with much needed food. In the 60s, he was a businessman, a town councillor, and a mayor. In the 70s and 80s, he took his cause to Queen's Park to ensure that Gore Bay and the rest of his riding got its fair share. In the 90s, he was an active senior citizen and a companion to his grandchildren. And in fact, he was the chair of the 1990 Centennial Committee. He lived to see our entry into the 21st century. He had a good life. I'm honored to accept this award on his behalf tonight. He would be very pleased to know that his community had bestowed this honor on him and that it appreciated the things he had done in his lifetime. And on behalf of the family, I wish to thank everybody very much. He's been gone a long time and it still bothers me. I guess that means something. Anyway, move on. We do have an opportunity tonight to welcome a couple individuals into our community hall who I know wish to say something. But before they do that, I have a small story to tell. And for those that know me, they probably know I'm not much of a storyteller, but I'll give it a shot. Recently, a mayor of a small town, I'm not going to say who it was or where it was, had the opportunity to attend a meeting with the MP and the MPP from the area in Northern Ontario, we'll say that. Anyway, on the way back on the plane, part way back, the pilot came out, and, who happened to be Australian, said, "I'm sorry, mates," he said, "but we have a trouble with the plane." And so there was silence for a minute. And then the MP, getting quite excited, said, "Well, there's a federal election coming and I have to get back to Ottawa." So she grabbed a parachute and jumped out of the plane. So there was another silence. And then the MPP said, "Well, there's a lot going on at Queen's Park. We have that teacher strike, you know. I have to get back and do my piece." So he grabbed the parachute and jumped out of the plane. So that just left the mayor and this young pilot. And they looked at each other for a minute, and the mayor, being the gracious fellow he was, said, "I've had a good life. You're a young man. You take the other parachute, and I'll go down with the plane." And the pilot said with a grin, he said, "No problem, mate," he said. "The only problem here is with the toilet. We're going to land in 5 minutes." So the moral of the story is, don't jump to conclusions until you hear the whole story.